The International Newsnet World Report is a national television news show available in more than 30 million homes. We broadcast daily real news the networks won't tell you. We are solely viewer-supported. That means you. You can donate at our website, INNWorldReport.net. We hope you find the following interview informative and helpful.
In the spring of 2007, the Bush crime spree in Washington goes on under the nose of the new Democratic Congress. On Capitol Hill, oversight has blinders and is wearing sunglasses. The world's most formidable military continues its reign of terror on the Muslim world in the name of free market capital. It's just another day at INN. Suddenly there is a knock on the door. It's BBC investigative journalist Greg Palast. At first, I thought he was selling copies door to door of the new release of his best-selling book, Armed Madhouse. But no, he wants to talk, and we're going to let him. Welcome to INN, Greg.
Hi, thanks, Lenny. I already sold you one. So did your mom want one? Okay. So what's hot? Yeah, let's talk.
Greg, what's new in the book? It's a re-release.
Yeah, it's re-released, and whether Karl Rove likes it or not, it's now on the Times bestseller list again. And we've thickened it up, fattened it up, because the evil rolls on. In fact, I'm thinking of putting Velcro on the end just so people can, just attach the new chapters as the evil continues. So, this is the whole title of the book tells you what's in it. Our Madhouse, sordid secrets and strange tales of a White House gone wild. And as you said, I report for BBC television, and I do that over there because apparently it's against Patriot Act 3 to do it here. So I'm exiled. My reports are exiled, and that's the big problem.
Recently, we heard you on Robert F. Kennedy's show, Ring of Fire. You were talking about Timothy Griffin
yeah.
and vote caging.
Yes.
Karl Rove, Bush's brain.
Yes. Well, what happened was, in fact, the first review of Our Madhouse came from Karl Rove in a review that was subpoenaed. This is a first for America, which is the House Judiciary Committee subpoenaed all of Rove's documents regarding the firing of federal prosecutors. So in those emails from Karl Rove, he actually was screaming about that British reporter, Greg Palast. And as you could tell, I'm Karl. I'm an American. You may be un-American. I just report from Britain. So that's the story. But he was screaming about me. What he was particularly screeching about, and in a February 7th email, just this year, he and his Rove bots were gloating and complaining about the book Our Madhouse. They even included a PDF attachment to it. And what they were very concerned that the public not see, and they haven't seen on so-called mainstream press. I'm mainstream, by the way, BBC, but mainstream across the Gulf Stream over there. So I appreciate INN breaking this omerta. And what they were finding, what I was able to put in the book, was some of those emails that are supposedly missing from Karl Rove's computer that went through the Republican National Committee computers. I got them, and what they were evidence that Karl Rove and his little operatives had challenged the votes of tens of thousands of black voters, and their targets were students. They targeted men registered out of homeless shelters on the grounds that they had suspicious addresses, and a third group with a very suspicious address, soldiers sent overseas. What they did was they sent letters to the soldiers' homes and said, do not forward. When the letters came back, they said, boom, we've got evidence that these are suspicious voters voting from a suspicious address. When their absentee ballots came back from Baghdad, they were challenged. They didn't know it. Their vote was thrown out. 500,000 absentee ballots were thrown out under the Republican challenge operation. 500,000. It was covered on BBC. It's now being covered on INN. It wasn't covered here. That's what they don't want you to read in Our Madhouse. That's what Bobby Kennedy, by the way, who is a voting rights attorney, was saying. Greg, what we have here is evidence of Karl Rove and his gang not just doing something creepy and awful, knocking out black soldiers off the voter rolls. It's illegal. It's against the law. And who was in charge? Who did he put in charge of this? A guy named Tim Griffin. Where is Tiny Tim today? He's the
U.S. Attorney for Arkansas.
Bingo! You got a free copy of the book.
Well, let's change topics a little bit. In the book, you talk a lot about the war for oil, otherwise known as the neocons' great big business development deal. This is all in the name of free market. People have been suspecting this. Michael Moore, who seems to be in a world of trouble as of today's headlines, mentioned this in his movie. He showed contracts being handed out, giant conferences of this before that. But you look at it in a different way. How do you see it?
Well, I mean, look, Iraq's a profit center. And, you know, first of all, I know that a lot of people who watch INN are conspiracy nuts who think that George Bush had a secret plan to seize the oil fields of Iraq before the tanks rolled, which isn't true. He had two plans. We got both in the book, which we put on BBC television. Actually, I stood up in front of the White House on BBC television, nightly news, and said, hey, here's the documents, here's the contracts, here's the secret documents saying what we're going to do with the oil fields of Iraq. These things were developed, by the way, beginning December 2002, a month before the inauguration. Forget September 11th. September 11th was just, you know, the sales pitch. There were two plans. And one plan was neocon plan, which was we're going to remake Iraq, we're going to privatize everything, we're going to sell off everything, which they did. The problem with selling off Iraq's banks, Iraq's bridges, Iraq's water systems, is that the people of Iraq only had bags of those Saddam dinars. They couldn't buy their own country back. It was sold off. Every Iraqi bank was sold to a consortium controlled by Lehman Brothers. Every bakery was sold to the Russians and Chinese. It was a tragedy. They lost all their industry. Anything worth having was simply grabbed with both hands. Here's the odd one. People said, yeah, but they didn't privatize the oil fields. They didn't sell off the oil fields. That's because, you know who objected? They didn't care what the Iraqis said. Big Oil objected. Chevron objected. Exxon objected. Why would the oil companies object to selling off Iraq's oil fields? The answer is, they've been in the Mideast a long time. They said, that's not how you do it. You don't take title, you take control. See, they need a state oil company to have control to suppress oil production in Iraq. See, because the basic rule of oil production is the lower the supply, the higher the price. So they had this whole scheme going. I was one of those people who said, well, we went into Iraq for the oil. We didn't. We did not go into Iraq for the oil. We went into Iraq to make sure we didn't get the oil. In other words, the lower the supply, the higher the price. Saddam wanted to sell more oil. Remember, we're the ones that limited him. We had something called an oil for food program, right? Very little food for them, very little oil for us. The result being that we had as we limited Saddam to 2 million barrels of oil a day, we ended up with they're wanting to sell us more, but that would bring down the price of oil. Big oil companies weren't going to go along with that. I have the documents in here. They haven't denied it. Who wrote up Iraq's oil plans? The big oil companies.
Well, Paul Bremer originally came up with privatizing Iraq's oil. The Iraq Study Group recommended, almost insisted, privatizing Iraq's oil.
Yes.
The Democrats are going along with privatizing Iraq's oil. The Iraq Congress has yet to vote on the Iraq Hydrocarbon law. It's thinking about a 2-month vacation to think about it as the people of Iraq understand more about the law. And Dick Cheney just went over there and said, we don't want this 2-month vacation. Let me ask you one important question. Yeah. Is our Madhouse available in Arabic so that the Iraqis can fully understand this?
Ta-da! Guess what? Yes, it's being translated into Arabic right now. And so that the Iraqis could actually see the oil plans that have been drafted for them. Because it's funny. It's funny. It's tragic, but it's funny also. After a year and a half going literally undercover to get the secret State Department and Defense Department plans for the oil fields of Iraq, which it's called Options for a Sustainable Iraqi Oil Industry. Now, this is our State Department saying what the Iraqi oil industry would be. There's not one single Iraqi involved in determining what their options ought to be, right? We're telling them. And every option is the same. Every option has one single purpose, as they said, quote, to enhance Iraq's relationship with OPEC, the oil cartel controlled by Saudi